Hello everyone, I'm Beck, your friendly Ghost Lab game dev. I bet you're here to level up your game dev knowledge, so let's get to it! So maybe you've seen an image like this on Unity's Lifecycle and think, whoa, what the heck is all of this? So today, we are going to work on demystifying this lifecycle, starting with understanding the difference between the awake function and the start function. And as a bonus, you will also learn about the OnEnable function. Here I am in Unity, and this is our demo project that we'll be experimenting with. It's a simple 2D platform with some basic player controls and animations. Our player can jump around, climb ladders, and collect some coins. On each of the coin game objects, I have a script called Lifecycle Test, which I created by right-clicking in the asset directory and selecting Create New C# Script. I give it a name, and I hit Enter. Then I can drag and drop the new script onto each of the coin objects. I'll put a link to the code in the description so you can grab the script if you want. In the inspector, you can give the object a name, which is useful when you have multiple objects of the same type, all with the same script. For example, here I have 3 coins with the lifecycle test script attached. I will name them coin A, coin B, and coin C, so we can see which object is executing in the console. Now that we've done that, let's open up the test script in the code editor. As you can see, I've added a lot of comments here to help remind you what each piece of code is, but don't get overwhelmed. At the end, I will summarize all the key points you will need. You will also see I have some code in here that is commented out. I'll be using it as part of the demo later, but let's just focus on the active code. You will see here that I have 2 variables, object name and object audio. Object name is the field where we added the name of our coin earlier, so we can identify which object is executing in the console. Object audio is here so that we can play some sound when we collect our coins. Next, we have our functions of interest, the start function, the enable function, and the awake function, followed by the update function, which we will not be discussing in this video. Each function has a simple debug.log statement that will print out the function name and the name of the object that executed that function. So let's run this script and see what we get. Take note that we only have 2 coins currently active, coin A and coin B. Open up the console and let's hit play. Interesting, we have awake from coin A, followed by OnEnable by coin A, and then awake from coin B, followed by enable from coin B. Then we see the start function runs for coin A and coin B. So this order of execution is important. Awake will run once when the scene is first loaded or reloaded if the game object is enabled. That's this little checkbox here. If the game object is disabled, then the awake function will not run until the object is enabled. OnEnable will run directly after awake if the component is enabled. That's this checkbox here. As we will see soon, OnEnable can be executed every time the component is re-enabled. Start will only run once. It runs after awake and OnEnable, and before the first frame update, but only if the component is enabled. So let's see this in action. This checkbox here will disable our coin A game object. Save and press play. And boom, we see that the code for coin A did not run on scene load. Now while our scene is still running, let's re-enable our coin A game object. Check that out, now our coin A code has executed. Now let's try that again, but instead we're going to deactivate the script component instead of the game object. So let's clear out our console and hit play again. And bam, look at that. This time, even though the script was disabled, the awake function still runs, but OnEnable and start do not. This is an important distinction to make. If you don't want to await the awake function to run when the scene first loads, then the game object has to be disabled. If you want the awake function to run and not OnEnable or start, you will need to disable the component on the object. Now while this is still in play mode, let's re-enable our script component. And now the OnEnable function runs. And watch, if we disable and re-enable it again, you will see the OnEnable function will run every time. Now let's look at a common error you might run into when it comes to initializing and referencing objects within these functions. The null reference exception. Say you want to play audio each time the coin is enabled, so you set up your reference to your audio source in your start function, and then you add the .play function to inside the OnEnable function. When looking at your code, it looks like you're referencing the audio component before you play your audio, so all should be good, right? Well, let's see. And there it is, the dreaded null reference exception. So you go back to your code, and you think, man, I don't understand what's happening. But as we saw before, OnEnable will run before the start function for each of our coins. This means we don't have the reference to our audio component yet. Just because OnEnable is below our start function in our code does not mean it will run after start. OnEnable always runs before start when the scene is first loaded. So to fix this, we can remove our reference from start and add it to our awake function. Let's run our code again, and our error is gone. Phew! So it's important to note that start may not be called at the same time as awake, which can result in unexpected behavior. More often than not, we will want to pass our initialization code in the awake function, then use start to pass information between objects. However, you can safely use the findWithTag function within awake. What you don't want to do is try to reference a variable on another object within awake. That might not be initialized yet. For example, if we try to get the player health in awake, it doesn't throw an error, but instead says 0. But if we look at our player script, we see that the player health should be initialized to 100. If we access it in the start function instead, we get the correct value. Now there are more advanced features you can use, such as adjusting the script execution order for your project settings, which will give you finer control over your execution order, but I will leave that for a more advanced video. So we've covered a lot here, so let's say a quick review of the key points. So awake is called once when scene loads or when the game object is first initialized. Awake is called if the script component is disabled but the game object is active. It is not called if the game object is inactive. Do initialize your variables in awake. Do set up references such as the getComponent function or findWithTag function. Don't reference objects that may not be awake yet. Execution order is unreliable. OnEnable is called after awake and before start. OnEnable can be called multiple times when a script component or game object is enabled or re-enabled. OnEnable is used in conjunction with OnDisable. You want to use OnEnable to run code that should be run each time the component or game object is enabled. The start function is called once after awake and before the first frame of update if the script component is enabled. Start will not get called if the script component is disabled. Instead, it will run for the first time it is enabled. Start can be used as a coroutine to suspend execution or delay initialization code until it's needed. Use start to pass information between objects. So I hope that was helpful. If not, let me know in the comments or tell me what Unity concepts give you the most difficulty.